thank you so much for joining me today, Markus.
Thank
You're
you. Thank you.
joining me all the way from Sweden.
Yes, I am.
Tell me, how did you get into Status Quo?
Well, I remember my first encounter with Status Quo was when I was 6 or 7 years old. I remember coming home from school one day and I heard a song being blasted at full volume. And I couldn't tell what band or what song it was. But back then, I was a massive Beach Boys fan. I still am. But back then, Beach Boys was my favorite group, so to say. And later on, when I actually got home, I heard that the noise came from my family's apartment. And I opened the door, and there I see my dad in his underpants, vacuum cleaning. And I asked him, "What is this?" "Oh, it's a vacuum cleaner." "No, I mean the song." "Oh, this is a band called Status Quo from England." And the song was Fun, Fun, Fun that they did with the Beach Boys on the Don't Stop album. So after that, I stole that CD that he had got. And I remember it was a compilation album. And I remember this first song was Caroline. And yeah, this is groovy, I thought. And then I skipped a few songs, and the next song that came on was Wild Side of Life. And I remember when I heard the third song, which was Roll Over Lay Down, I was hooked, as you say.
As many people are when they hear those free tracks and many others in the catalogue. You sent me a lengthy email about all the things that you've done within the Quo community, and of course your collection of vinyl. How much have you collected?
Oh, I don't know. It's about 400 or 500 vinyls now, approximately.
Oh,
Singles and LPs combined.
Wow. That is some collection. Is that mainly collected in Sweden, or have you had to import that?
No, I go to record fairs in Scandinavia. I've been to Copenhagen on a record fair there many times. I've been to record fairs in Germany. And also, when I go somewhere to see a Status Quo gig, for example, me and my friends took a long record haul day in Berlin. And we also took a long record haul day in Vienna. So you find the different pressings, and that's what I find interesting with collecting Status Quo, that you, and particularly singles, because you have these different covers and so on. It's very nice. It's a nice hobby.
Yes, I'm sure many people agree with you, me included, but I don't have nearly the amount that you have there.
Remember, this is LPs and singles combined.
Exactly.
I know that there are people that has a lot more, but yeah, it's I'm on my way there.
Definitely. You make reference to seeing the band live. How many times have you done that?
Well, I'm 25 years old now, so I wasn't around in the Status Quo's heyday, so to say. But I've seen the band 17 times now, and that includes the Frantic Four tour, or tours, and today's Quo, so to speak. So I've been to Austria, Switzerland, Denmark, England, and a lot of other places.
So you would have been in your teens when you saw the Frantic Four live?
I was 14 years old. I went with my dad to Hammersmith, and it was amazing.
It definitely was. I was there in 2013, and it was certainly it was a vibe that I don't think many people of under a certain age had experienced
No,
before.
and it was a dream come true, because when you idolize a group, you want to see the original core of the group. But obviously, Alan Lancaster, John Coughlin, and Francis Rossi and Rick Parfitt are the Frantic Four, and that's the band that I wanted to see. So at least once in my lifetime. And that opportunity came when I was 14 years old. So I remember that me and my dad went to England, to Hammersmith. We queued for about 6 or 7 hours before the actual concert. And we got quite close to the stage, almost front row, which was amazing. And when I heard Junior's Wailing, I was even more blown away about how good this group is. And I love that song, because Junior's Wailing was actually the first song that I learned to play on the guitar, the first Status Quo song, so to say. Well, Steamhammer song, but in Status Quo's touch.
Like you say, you're a musician yourself. You're in
Yes.
a band
Yeah.
called Tall Mark and the Squinting Seagulls.
Yeah.
Great name.
It's a funny name, isn't it?
Extremely funny. Are you Tall Mark?
I am, yeah. The thing is with our group, we play Status Quo-ish music, distinct, groovy rock and roll with influences from the 50s and harmonies. I like to combine the Quo groove with harmonies, as Status Quo also do 3-part harmonies as they sing in Whatever You Want and so on. But the thing is, I recorded a solo album which looks like this. When I recorded that album, I picked the musicians that I wanted to have on that album. The bass player and I had played for many, many years together. We studied upper secondary school together. So we had played for many years before. I knew this piano player who is a fantastic Jerry Lee Lewis boogie woogie piano player. So I called him and he was on, and also a drummer from a town nearby here, also a Status Quo fan. I told him that I am recording this album. I would like to rehearse these songs with you and record them in the studio. And that was the thought of that we record them and release them, and nothing more to it. However, concert organizers started hearing that we were recording. So when we were recording, I got a phone call from an organizer that said, "We would like you to come to our place and do a gig." Okay, but we don't have a name. We aren't even a group. We have just rehearsed these songs, nothing more. Oh well, he told me, that is your problem, because we want you here. Okay, when is the date for the concert, for the gig? Oh, in 2 months. So we had 2 months to pick a name, take band photos, rehearse. So we got the groove, the bounciness correct, and about a 3-hour set. So we did that, and it was rocking. It was how I want rock and roll to sound. So we just thought, what the hell? If we have done one gig, let's do a couple more. So we started uploading clips on Facebook and pictures on Facebook, and started promoting our name, which then became Tallmark and the Squinting Seagulls, because the names that we wanted, they were some band in China was called that already, and another band in America was called that already. So we took a name that nobody else had. And later on, we had our record release last summer. And out of the blue, we got a phone call that from a big pop idol from Sweden during the 60s and 70s. And he told us, I like your sound. I would like to release a couple of singles with you. And here we are now. The first single will be released the 26th of May. And later on, we will release 2 more. And who knows what that can lead to? Potentially a full-blown album, maybe.
You said to me beforehand that these were Quo-inspired. What makes you say that?
What makes me say that? A lot of punchy bass that needs to kick you in the chest. I remember the first gig I went to with Status Quo. It was in Copenhagen in this small venue. It was almost a conference hall in a hotel. I remember it was in a hotel complex. And I remember that concert well. But one thing that I remember the most is when Status Quo played Bye Bye Johnny. And when they come from the singing the quiet part, bye, 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 bye. And when everything goes into overdrive again. And I remember Rhino's bass just pumping me in the chest. I just couldn't believe it. It was so good. I will always remember it for the rest of my life, I think. That inspired me to say that we need bass. The bass need to drive the song, so to say. We have this typical, in 2 of the songs, we have this typical shuffle beat, and a lot of the waka waka, as Dave Edmonds called it.
Yes, the raka raka, right?
The raka raka.
Yes.
As call it. So it's a lot of waka waka or raka raka, and harmonies, and based on this 12-bar boogie rock that Status Quo are so well known for. So when we recorded the guitar parts, I thought that all the instruments, the piano, for example, when I play a solo, it needs to complement the guitars. I think it does in our groove, because it rocks, what I've heard from people. It rocks. The guitars are up there. They're in your face almost, but not too much. We try to take influences from the music that we like, because we think that we need to play the music that we like, otherwise it will just become boring.
Yeah, I agree with you. As a hobbyist musician myself, I think if you're playing things you're not that into, I think the feeling isn't there.
Yeah, it is gone. So it is the first song I Want to Know that we will release is 3-chord raka raka song. The first song that I wrote, actually, in my life. I was 16 or 17. And it is one of the most liked songs when we actually perform live. So it's fun.
Well, it sounds it. And I will leave all the links in the description below of where you can find the music. Before we started here, you told me a story about someone you met at, I think you said, a record fair, because up the road from where you are is obviously where Quo recorded their Rockin' All Over the World album.
I have approximately 40 minutes, a 40-minute drive from where I am located now to the town where Status Quo recorded their Rockin' All Over the World album. So when I go to that town or Gothenburg to record fairs and so on, with my Status Quo jacket full of patches and badges and the autographs on the back, you know what type of a jacket I talk about, yeah?
Yeah.
So you become well known by having a jacket like that at a record fair in Gothenburg. So you start hearing all these stories. And one guy told me that when they were recording the Rockin' All Over the World album, they went to a folk park. We have a culture with folk parks where people go on the weekends to dance. And there was a band, and all of a sudden this guy saw that Status Quo were in the park. He was a fan, so he was on his bicycle and he just fell over. He couldn't believe it. I heard another guy telling me that when they were recording the Rockin' All Over the World album, a friend of his actually met him and they played table tennis together. So he has played table tennis together with Status Quo during the 70s. Because Status Quo is still a very popular group in Sweden, and we still have a lot of Status Quo tribute bands and Status Quo influenced bands, and their music works here. We have a culture with old 50s and 60s and 70s American cars, and when you go cruising during the weekends, Fridays and Saturdays, you'll quite commonly hear at least one Status Quo song. Most commonly Caroline or Paper Plane, whatever you want, Rockin' All Over the World, or the Anniversary Waltz medleys.
Sorry, that almost doesn't fit with the rest of them, does it?
No, it doesn't. But when you're into the 50s rock and roll as well, you like them as well, the Anniversary Waltz medleys. I love them. I think that I Hear You Knocking, when they play I Hear You Knocking in the first one, I think it is a shame that Status Quo didn't record I Hear You Knocking in that groove for one of their cover albums, because I think it is so good.
They quote it up as
they quote it up, yeah.
Say. Yeah. You say that there is quite a culture for Quo and rock and roll in Sweden, and you're right,
yes,
there is, from what I see, because the fan club convention that they have every couple of years, there's been at least 2 Swedish bands on the bill at some point.
Yeah, you have Son of Status.
Yeah.
Good friends of mine. And you have Big Fat Mama from Stockholm, for example. Amazing bands there. So good. When I began playing, Joakim from Son of Status did some gigs with my group. So big shout out to Joakim. You're the best. Yeah, so it is a very popular music, and just in 2005 and 2006 they did this tour with Chuck Berry and a lot of other well-known Swedish acts that are cult bands in Sweden. So Status Quo works in Sweden.
One Quo album you would recommend to someone who doesn't know Quo?
Oh, this is almost impossible to say. There are so many. It depends on what you like. I'm not a big fan of the 60s Quo. It is too psychedelic for me.
It is, isn't it?
I love Technicolor Dreams and so on, but no, it's too psychedelic for me. So I wouldn't recommend any 60s album. I love them, but it's not my cup of tea, their music from that era. So I would recommend, so to say, any album from 73. I would say Hello is my favorite album, but occasionally I say that the Whatever You Want album is my favorite album, because I love Who Asked You and Shady Lady and so on. And also the song one of my favorite songs when I was little was the cover of Something About You Baby I Like.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the Never Too Late album as well. So it's also one of my favorites. So I would say anything from 73 to 81.
I think that's justified, and I think a lot of people would agree with you. Others would say, "What about Pile Driver?" But there we are. It's all down to personal preference, like you say.
I am, for example, I can listen to the orchestral version of Restless. I like that from Thursday Work. It's a great song. I'm not that locked into the 73 to 81 era. I can still listen to songs from Backbone, or if you take, for example, Thirsty Work, as I mentioned, with Restless and so on. The band Status Quo is the band Status Quo, and members come and members go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And at least they recorded Restless and not I've Had the Time of My Life. Although you say you're not a huge fan of the 60s stuff. They did a live version on radio back in the 60s of It Takes Two, which is kind of... that's kind of a bizarre thing. I think it's Marvin Gaye and Kim Weston. And it's Francis and Alan doing the vocals. It's a very strange choice.
Yeah, and it is. If you ask me, it is a bit strange. I want the rocky stuff. Yeah. The rocking boogie.
Definitely. Well, I will let you boogie on. But thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today.
Thank you very much, Jamie, and thank you for all the hard work that you put into this podcast. It's always nice to see when you upload new episodes.